Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? All right, two more dominoes have fallen in the NFL head coaching carousel. With the Raiders and the Jaguars finding their next head coaches. The splash hire today certainly was Pete Carrol going to the Raiders. We know Pete Carroll's history, of course, early in his career with the Jets and the Patriots, and then landing at USC with that amazing run, finding his way back to the NFL with the Seahawks, winning a Super Bowl, playing for another after a long tenure there. Was let go after last season, out of coaching this year, now back in the game with the Raiders. It is a bit surprising. Pete Carroll at 74 years old, the oldest head coach in NFL history now at this point. But fair to say maybe a youthful 74, a guy that's always had a lot of energy. And, you know, I know we get hyper-focused sometimes on the age of coaches, particularly in the NFL. This was a big deal with the Belichick conversation a year ago. Because he's 73. And I don't know, man. When are NFL head coaching hires ever thought to be long-term hires? In your head, you may think that's what you hope to achieve. Someone that'll be there for 15 years like Sean Payton was in New Orleans, or like what Mike Tomlin has done better part of 2 decades in Pittsburgh, or John Harbaugh in Baltimore. That's just not the reality. I mean, the Raiders hired a coach a year ago that lasted 1 season. So the Saints hired Dennis Allen. He didn't make it through year 3. So on one hand, I look at it and I go, man, yeah, 74 is old. On the other hand, I go, do you really think you're hiring any coach to be there for a decade? It's just not what it is in the NFL. I mean, Andy Reid in Kansas City now is the outlier. Sure, you go keep churning out Super Bowls of Patrick Mahomes. You got a job as long as you want it. That just ain't the norm for the 31 other teams in the NFL. So if the Raiders hire Pete Carroll and he establishes a little bit of culture, improves the roster, a guy that's a known culture roster builder that can get you to a more competitive championship level, all right. And then in 3 years, maybe hands it off to somebody else. The other does directly or indirectly, I should say, impact the Saints. The Jaguars have hired Liam Coen. Liam Coen spent this year, what an interesting ride for Liam Coen, from Kentucky to the Rams, back to Kentucky, then to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the OC, and then now as the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, it's notable because the Saints are in the same division as the Bucs, and so for the second consecutive year now, the Bucs lose their OC. Dave Canales a year ago becomes the head coach at Carolina. Now Liam Coen becomes the head coach with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, I guess there's something to be said, man. If you make it to the playoffs and you maximize Baker Mayfield, dog, you're going to be a head coach. So Dave Canales a year ago, and it seemed to work. Bryce Young later in the season was starting to come into his own, looking more like a guy that was worthy of a first-round pick in the last month of the season. We'll see what Liam Coen can do in Jacksonville. Certainly his task is going to be go maximize Trevor Lawrence. Because not only did they take him number 1 overall, of course, they've already invested in a second contract in Trevor Lawrence. But this is less about Liam Coen, the result of the Bucs, or what it means for Jacksonville. It's all about how it relates to New Orleans. So the newsworthy item for the Saints here on Friday is that the Saints have now conducted their second in-person interview. Last week, Darren Rizzi had his in-person interview with New Orleans. That was something they were allowed to do because he was already an in-house candidate, so no big deal there with how that played out. So you were able to interview Darren Rizzi in person last week. Now you've interviewed Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Weaver's an interesting guy, of course, who played in the NFL. He's 44 years old. He's been a career assistant, but looking for that first head coaching opportunity now in his mid-40s. Interviewed for a couple of the vacancies a year ago, including Atlanta. So I don't believe Anthony Weaver is going to get the job. I don't think he's a guy at or near the top of the Saints wish list. What we also know is that Mike Kafka is set to interview this weekend in person. That's the Giants offensive coordinator. And then next week, Mike McCarthy is supposed to interview in person with the New Orleans Saints as well. And if I have one big takeaway from the hires that have already been made, it's that the hires that have been made have allowed the Saints to stay in play with their top targets. Now, the exception, of course, is Aaron Glenn. But, and who knows if the Saints actually coveted Ben Johnson. I would assume they did because everyone did. He was the top guy in this class that everybody wanted, and he landed in Chicago. But, we looked at the hires that had already been made up until this point with Mike Vrabel going to New England. That's probably a guy the Saints wanted to talk to, but he took a better job. We mentioned Ben Johnson, of course, landing at Chicago. And then Aaron Glenn is the other one that the Saints wanted, but who was the Saints' reported top target. He lands in New York with the Jets. Well, after that, you're starting to see all these coaching dominoes fall with the Raiders and the Jaguars now having their coaches. And so you look at New Orleans and you go, all right, well, Dallas still has to hire a coach. But it doesn't seem as though the Saints and the Cowboys are fishing in the same waters. So at this point, while Aaron Glenn might have been your top target, and he took a deal with the Jets, at this point, the Saints kind of have their pick. And I'll reiterate the thing that I think is most important for New Orleans right now, and it is not to rush to a decision. Because whoever you want to hire at this point, you have time. You have time. The league year, look, yes, this coming week is the Senior Bowl. The league year doesn't start until March. The draft isn't until April. I mean, you have time. I'm not saying you're waiting until March to hire a coach. What I am saying is there's no reason to rush a coach to the podium right now. If you want to talk to Joe Brady, but the Bills upset Kansas City this week, you can wait 2 more weeks until Buffalo, plays in the Super Bowl to talk to Joe Brady. Because the reality is, ain't nobody else hiring Mike McCarthy. I don't suspect Mike Kafka or Anthony Weaver are getting hired by the Dallas Cowboys. So when you look at it, you kind of at this point have your pick of who's left. In this game of musical chairs, yes, Dallas is out there as well, but you have really your pick of who's out there right now. So the one thing that I really want for New Orleans to do is take your time. If you want to wait and talk to Cliff Kingsbury, if Washington wins this weekend and goes to the Super Bowl, wait another 2 weeks. There is no reason to rush. You want to hire Darren Rizzi? You can hire Darren Rizzi. Because if you don't, somebody's going to hire him to be a special teams coach. He's going to be fine. You want to hire Mike McCarthy? Great. Wait 2 weeks. Mike McCarthy ain't going nowhere. He's just chilling. But I will say, the thing that I find perhaps the most appealing, and this is something that is starting to resonate a bit more with me. I think what the Raiders did this year, meaning in the past calendar year, is actually something that the Saints could replicate. The Raiders hired Antonio Pierce, and Pierce lasted 1 year. And I'm not saying you hire a coach with the intent of him being a 1-year guy. And we all want that answer. But part of the reason the Saints didn't make the cut for their top guy and Aaron Glenn, and part of the reason they never got a glance from Ben Johnson, is the Saints aren't a good job. It's not a good job right now. We've talked about it a ton. No franchise quarterback, aging roster, awful cap situation, all the stuff. Well, Scott Shanley tweeted this on Thursday. And it was a quote tweet of a PFF thing about future salary cap space. And in 2025, as we know, the Saints currently are $52 million over the cap. But as Shanley points out, in 26, you go $60 million under the cap. And in 2027, you go $221 million under the cap. As a lot of now look, that's going to change, right? Because you're going to sign free agents. You're going to have to restructure deals this year, which is going to kick money into future years. But the point is, your cap situation 12 months from now and 24 months from now can, if you're responsible, completely shift to where you have money to spend. You can get younger, provided you do well in the draft and you find starting players in the draft. And of course, the salary cap will continue to rise. So a year from now, you are a much more desirable job than you are today. So maybe there's nothing wrong with retaining Darren Rizzi for a year. Cut Derek Carr, spread that money out over the next 2 years after this one. Bring in an inexpensive veteran, bring in Jacoby Brissett, bring in Jimmy G. Let them battle it out with Rattler and Haener, see how that goes. You're not going to be good anyway. So you take it on the chin, you win 4 or 5 games, you're picking in the top 5 of the draft, and next year when you have a deep quarterback draft class and money to spend in free agency and a top 5 pick, then maybe you go get the guy that is your guy. Now, I know that is counter to the way the Saints have operated. They want tenure and they want stability. That's what they've been for 20 years. But look where it's gotten you. Now, you're in a terrible situation. I think the worst thing the Saints could do is rush a hire and remain all in. The best thing they could do is acknowledge where you are. Instead of trying to fight your way out of this box that you're in, that you're not getting out of. Like you're full on David Blaine, man. You're in a straitjacket with chains and everything, and you're in a box and you don't have a key. Like you're stuck. It's going to suck in 2025. It is going to suck. There is no way out of that. You've got to accept there is no way out of this. Derek Carr isn't all of a sudden going to come back next year and be a Hall of Famer. Cam Jordan ain't going to drink from the fountain of youth. Like, you're not going to be awesome next year. You're not. There's no Jaden Daniels waiting to save you. It's just, that's not there. You're not going from a 4-win team. You draft Jaden Daniels, you're in the conference championship game. It doesn't exist for these Saints. Acknowledge that and play the long game. Which you should have done 2 years ago. But you just kept hammering away, trying to dig yourself out of that hole. And all you did was dig deeper. So be patient. Play the long game for the betterment of the franchise. For the love of God, don't rush someone up to a podium because you feel like you have to hurry and make a hire. All you have now is time because you're the only game in town. You and Dallas aren't, who knows what Jerry Jones is going to do. But you and Dallas aren't competing for the same candidates right now. So take your time, interview all your candidates, and make a hire when you're ready. Make the best hire based on what's going to be the best long-term solution for this organization. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.